What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Before I forget, make sure to check out Packer Report today. My grades will be up at 8 o'clock a.m., so you can check out my full grades from this past week, offense and defense, as well as through the season so far. You know, it's a great way to get kind of a gauge of how everyone's playing. As you know, I grade every player on every play in every game all season long. This is my fifth season doing it. So you get quite a bit of insight from digging into those. And are they the be all end all? Are they perfect? Absolutely not. But I like to think that, you know, it's the most in-depth, in detail grading and analysis that you're going to find anywhere, period, on the Packers. And you're getting a consistent grader week in, week out for 5 straight years now. So you start picking up on some things and you can certainly start telling who's playing well, who's not playing well. So if you have yet to check that out, make sure to do so. And again, my latest will be up on Packer Report at 8 a.m. on Friday. We'll get into my defensive grades from this past week in just a moment, but before we get there, more news, notes, injury updates, COVID updates, etc. It's sort of like, you know, as the COVID turns and as the the roster turns with Green Bay at this point, there's new updates seemingly every day that are going to affect this team, but mostly good news, I think, on this Thursday, but we'll kind of take a look back at everything. Elgton Jenkins and Randy Ramsey added to the COVID list. Both players were on IR already, so from a pure football standpoint, doesn't affect Green Bay as of right now because neither player were going to play again this season anyway. However, of course, you're always hoping for the best from them for a health standpoint, so we'll still keep an eye on that, but both Jenkins and Ramsey moved to the COVID list. Kevin King and Shemar Jean Charles, activated from the COVID list. So what happens, I don't know how closely you guys have been tracking this. So what happens a lot of times is players will get taken off the COVID list and then placed on an exemption list for like a day just to kind of get ramped back up and everything. And then if everything sort of clears, then they practice the next day. So as I mentioned yesterday, MVS had cleared yesterday, but he was immediately moved to that exemption list. And then now today or on Thursday, he was off the exemption list and actually practicing. So King and John Charles are on that exemption list now. So they're off the COVID list, on the exemption list, but it's basically just procedural, and they should be back and ready to play this Sunday if needed against the Minnesota Vikings. So more good news there. I think the most surprising, as well as the best news, is that Randall Cobb was back at practice and he looked really good. So it's pretty incredible that he just had, this major core injury, was supposed to be out an extended period of time, and all of a sudden he's back practicing. Now, does not look like there's any chance of him potentially playing this week. He hasn't been ruled out entirely, but it doesn't look like that'll be the case. The early reporting on this, including from Ian Rappaport, seems to be that this is in an effort to get him ramped up for the playoffs. But even that would be huge news. If he's ready to go for Green Bay's first playoff game, that would be a massive win. He has been one of the Packers' best players on offense this season when he's been healthy. He is a huge addition. He is a key to this offense and somebody that would absolutely help the Packers navigate the playoffs. So if he is in fact ready to go for whatever week one of the playoffs is for the Packers, whether that's wild card or division, that is big news. And the fact that he's back practicing and looked good in practice in the limited video that we saw is a great sign. And again, very pleasant news for the Packers. They also added another wide receiver to the practice squad, David Moore, former Seattle Seahawks wide receiver. So some more depth at that position moving forward. From an injury report standpoint, no updates on that end. Everyone stayed status quo. I think kind of the big one you're sort of keeping an eye on there is Tyler Lancaster. Is he going to be able to go with Green Bay sort of being a little bit beat up along the defensive line with, or at least with Kingsley Keke on the COVID list? That's going to be something to keep an eye on. So we'll see if Lancaster can, in fact, get back and ready to play. But as of right now, he was not practicing on Thursday, which isn't always a great sign. Other news, Jim Gray threw this out there as an idea, and I love this idea. He suggested to rename the All-Pro team the All-Madden team. It just makes way too much sense. It should be absolutely something that happens. We have the Lombardi Trophy and the Hallis Trophy and all these other, honors and trophies named after different players. Naming the All-Pro team the All-Madden team is just so chef kiss perfect. It has to happen. I would love to see that great idea thrown out there by Jim Gray. And then last, from a news standpoint, Leroy Butler, once again named a finalist for the Hall of Fame. This seems like it has to be the year. He's the only safety on the list. He's well overdue for the award, for the recognition. He absolutely has to be a Hall of Famer. And hopefully this is the year that the Hall of Fame rectifies their error in not having him in the Hall of Fame. More than deserving. I know all of you know that. We don't have to go through his stats and accomplishments, but his impact on the 96 Super Bowl team, and just really sort of the player that bridged the gap between the bad 90s teams and then the bad like late 80s, early 90 teams, and then the teams that were actually competing. It was really Leroy Butler, and just a phenomenal player, a phenomenal presence. He's continued to have an impact off the field and on the game continuously as he's continues to be a radio announcer and all those sort of things. So here's hoping that this is the last and final time that we need to discuss Leroy Butler's candidacy for Hall of Fame, and that he finally gets in. He's once again a finalist and unquestionably should be and hopefully will be in the Hall of Fame sooner rather than later. All right, let's jump into my grades this week. As always, I'll give you my top 3 and bottom 3. This is for the defensive side of the ball from the Cleveland Browns game. Top 3, Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell, and Preston Smith. As far as Douglas goes, this game could be graded a lot higher dependent upon how you want to, or even lower, I guess you could say as well, dependent upon how you want to view his physical play in this game. PFF had actually a pretty low grade on him. I disagree with that. Now, if you're saying that, it should have been an illegal contact penalty on Darnell Savage's interception, and if you're saying that on his second interception, that should have been a game-changing, game-altering, and potentially even game-losing, pass interference penalty, then you're going to grade his game pretty low, right? If you're saying that, he didn't interfere on the last play, didn't interfere on the Savage play, then you could probably give him even a higher grade than what I gave him and, would have solidified himself by far and away as the top defender in this game. Where I kind of came across on this, I did think he had an illegal contact on the Savage play, and I negatively graded him as such on that play. His first interception, I thought was a really nice play. So that one stood as it was and was a really positive play. And then on the last play of the game, I did grade that as a positive, not as much as I normally would have on a game-winning interception to seal the game and get yourself a win on a contested play. Like that should be almost as high of a grade as you get, right? That is in a position where if that's completed or there's an interference penalty, that Cleveland very well may win that game. And if you get a turnover, your team may win the game. It's tough to grade much better than that. I do think that he tugged at the top of the route. I think something could have been called there. I also think that the offensive player ran into Rasul. So I think, when the offensive player initiates contact, the defensive back's going to get a little leeway on having some contact back. I did think there was that, push and pull sort of at the beginning. And then at the very end of the route, there was a little bit more of a pull, which is what I thought could have ultimately been called. I still graded it as a very positive play. And the reason that I did so was because if you look at that game as a whole, not just how defensive backs were being called, but that game as a whole, there were a ton of no calls. They were letting them play in that game. And at some point, you need to play to the level that's being officiated. And if they are turning their eye the other way and letting things go and swallowing their whistle, then you need to play a tough physical brand of football. And you better be ready that if the receiver's ready to run into you, you're going to give it back to them. And that to me is to some extent what happened on that play. Could something have been called? Yes. Do I think that, Browns fans have maybe a reason to be upset with nothing being called there? I think you can make an argument. I don't think it's, all that different than Packer fans being upset with Alan Lazard, not getting, the penalty call last year in the NFC Championship game. I think it's very similar when you see that sort of aggressiveness at the point of attack and the ball's thrown that way. You generally would, sort of come to expect a call in that scenario. But just like in the Tampa game, where we saw that, that they were mostly letting them play up until the last play of the game, so on and so forth. But we're not going to get into all of that. But when they're letting them play, you have to sort of change your brand of football. I thought Douglas played a physical brand of football all game long. And I thought in that specific game, it benefited him, and he ends up with 2 interceptions and affecting another play that ends up in a savage interception. So for me, still ends up the top graded defender in this game. If you think there's no penalties there, or he was not to blame at all, then you can bump it up even more, and he would have been head and shoulders above everyone else. If you think that he was over aggressive and that those should have been penalties, well, then knock him down, and you're going to agree more with Pro Football Focus and where they had him in this game. Secondly, I had Devondre Campbell, I thought his batting down the screen pass late in the game was one of the low-key, really big moments in the game. He also had another play where I thought he made a really nice play, which could have been a much bigger gain, where he made a tackle in the open field. And you could just see him getting sideline to sideline, shedding blocks. It wasn't always on plays that made an impact, but you could still see him right place, right time more often than not. And I thought this was another really nice game for Devondre. And then Preston Smith had the sack late, but I thought he did the best job of all the edge defenders of setting the edge well, not overcommitting himself. I thought, he was going up against Joel Bitonio all game, who I know is playing out of position, but is still one of the better offensive linemen in all of football. I thought he gave him all he could handle. I thought he was consistently pushing the pocket backward. So really nice game for Preston. And I think these 3 by far and away were the 3 that were most deserving of high grades in this game. Again, Rasul, Devondre, and Preston Smith. And then my 3 lowest graded players in this game, Jonathan Garvin. One of the biggest issues for me in this game for the Packers run defense and all their struggles was the inability to really set the edge very well and be a physical player at the point of contact. I thought Preston did a pretty good job, as just mentioned, but I thought Gary and especially Tipa, as well as Jonathan Garvin, really struggled in that regards, just playing gap sound football, setting the edge, getting everything to move back inside, where I thought the interior defenders for the most part did a pretty decent job in this game, but the edge defenders just didn't funnel everything back inside, and that's where Green Bay started to run into issues. If you think of some of those big runs to the outside, that was certainly the case. So I think there's a massive, massive drop-off on this team right now. When Preston and Gary are in, they're playing very well, and then all of a sudden Garvin and Tipa come in, and it's just such a drop-off at edge defender. And I think they have to look at alternating those, so it's not Tipa and Garvin at the same time, where either Preston or Gary are in the game more often than not. But either way, I don't know what you can do to fix that position. I don't know if maybe you try Kingsley Keke back out there. I'm not sure. You're at a point where there's not many players left to sign, but I think they have to still try to scrounge and find anything they can, because right now I think Jonathan Garvin's my lowest graded player on the team this season. He's really struggling. I actually struggle with his effort quite a bit at times. There was a play in this game where it should have been an easy sack for Garvin. It was a perfectly drawn up play call by Joe Barry, and Garvin comes free, and it's just like it's like he's stuck in mud. I don't even know. There should have been no hesitation. It should have been an easy sack on the quarterback. Instead, there's this weird hesitation, and Baker escapes outside, and that was the play where Tipa kind of got the gimme sack on it. But perfectly drawn up play should have been an easy sack for Garvin, and he doesn't even touch Baker. So there's just plays like that are very frustrating, and I think they have to look and see if they can figure something out there. It would be a huge get if they could somehow get Z back, but as I mentioned, I think that has gone out the window a little bit. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong, but that is a major issue still. And I thought Jonathan and Tipa was my 3rd lowest graded player. Their inability, and for Tipa, it's the opposite, right? I think he has a lot of effort. He's a lot of passion, a lot of energy, but he's just undersized, and he really struggles to hold up at the point of attack. So I thought that was a big issue in this game. So those were my 1st and 3rd lowest graded defenders. And then 2nd was Tyler Lancaster, which also sort of the opposite, where I actually thought that he was in the right spot at the right time more often than not, and unfortunately just wasn't athletic enough to make the play. So you would see him get to the outside, but he just didn't have the speed to get to Chubb or anyone on the outside. And it's just that lack of athletic ability with Lancaster that hurts him at times. If you need somebody to clog up the middle of the defense and just not be moved and to kind of reset the line of scrimmage a little bit, he's not going to collapse pockets, right? But he's also going to be, somebody who can eat defenders and keep things open for Campbell and Barnes and so on and so forth. I think he gets a worse rap than what he deserves. I think as your 5th, 6th defensive lineman, rotational guy, run defender, I think he actually serves a pretty good purpose for what he does. But if you have to have him get to the outside and start making plays, he just doesn't have the agility, the quickness to make that sort of stuff, and that's where it really hurt him in this game. I thought he did a lot of things right, just the lack of overall athleticism really hurt him in this game overall. So top 3, Rasul, Devondre, Preston. Bottom 3, Garvin, Lancaster, and Tipa. that is going to do it for me today. I will be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode on New Year's Day. Yes, we don't stop no matter what. New episode 365 days a year. So I'll be right back here tomorrow. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Enjoy your New Year's. Hope you have a very happy and healthy start to 2022. I will see you tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go, and Happy New Year.